Let me begin with the hard truth most people spend their entire lives running away from. Getting rich is not complicated. The mechanics of it are not hidden in some sacred library or locked away by elites. The process has always been simple. What makes it brutal is not the knowledge itself, but the willingness to do what that knowledge demands. People don't fail because it is too hard to understand. They fail because they refuse to stomach the cost of reality. They want riches that arrive gently, without risk, without pain, without resistance. They want the crown, without the battlefield. But Machiavelli warned in The Prince that a man who becomes ruler through fortune alone, without strength, will lose what fortune gave him. The same principle applies to wealth. If you want it without struggle, it will vanish as quickly as it came. Think about how most people approach money. They fantasize about a windfall, some winning ticket, or a stroke of luck that spares them the discomfort of strategy and sacrifice. They listen to empty slogans about working hard, playing fair, and keeping faith in the system. They are told to dream big, to stay positive, to believe in merit. These are not truths. They are illusions designed to keep the herd docile, because a man who believes the game is fair will never question the rules. And a man who never questions the rules will never see that the game itself was built to trap him. The truth is plain. Wealth flows to those who accept the world as it is, not as they wish it to be. The poor pray for fairness. The rich prepare for reality. The system is not built to make you wealthy. It is built to make you predictable. Predictable workers can be taxed, managed, and quietly controlled. Predictable consumers will waste their wages on comfort, never questioning why they feel stuck. Machiavelli said, "Men are more apt to be deceived by appearances than by reality, for everyone can see, but few can perceive." Society thrives on this blindness. It feeds you appearances of progress while withholding the substance of power. Look at the average man. He wakes up to the alarm clock he did not choose. He drags himself through traffic to a job he does not love. He trades hours for wages, comes home exhausted, and spends what little remains on distractions, TV, social media, small pleasures to numb the dissatisfaction. He repeats this pattern for decades, convinced that safety lies in predictability. But what he calls safety is nothing but a cage. It keeps him comfortable enough not to revolt, but powerless enough never to rise. Comfort is the silent killer of ambition. It feels warm, but it rots you from within. Think of a lion raised in captivity. It is fed, it is safe, it is secure. But when the cage opens, it does not know how to hunt. It has traded its claws for predictability. The same happens to men who settle for comfort. They trade the chance of sovereignty for the illusion of stability. And when danger arrives, when inflation rises, when economies collapse, when industries die, they discover too late that their comfort was never security at all. Machiavelli understood this when he wrote that fortune is like a woman. She favors the bold, not the timid. Wealth has always belonged to those willing to break pattern, to risk failure, to endure discomfort. The bold man builds. The timid man waits. The bold man seizes control. The timid man begs for permission. And after decades, the timid man looks back at a life traded for scraps, while the bold man has multiplied himself into power. Let me give you a picture. Imagine two men starting with the same job, the same paycheck, the same world. The first man plays it safe. Every month he saves a small amount, dreaming of one day retiring with enough to survive. He obeys the rules written for him. Work hard, save diligently, avoid risk. Decades pass, and he retires with a modest pension, a tired body, and no true freedom. His life was predictable, but predictability was his downfall. The second man makes a different choice. Instead of merely saving, he studies how wealth actually moves. He invests in skills that multiply his value. He builds a small venture, maybe clumsy at first, but real. He learns to sell, to persuade, to create. He reinvests instead of hoarding. 10 years later, he owns assets that work for him. Streams of cash that flow even while he sleeps. Same years, same world, but entirely different destinies. One man retired into fragility, the other into sovereignty. What separates them is not intelligence. It is not luck. It is not privilege. It is simply the courage to abandon illusions. The first clung to safety. The second embraced brutality. Now ask yourself this. Why do most men choose the first path, even when they know it leads to servitude? Why do they cling to the comfort that chains them? The answer lies in psychology. Humans fear loss more than they desire gain. The pain of failure cuts deeper than the dream of success inspires. So they retreat into the smallest possible life, telling themselves it is enough. But as Machiavelli taught, it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. The wealthy apply this not just to politics but to money. They fear stagnation more than they fear risk. They choose boldness not because it is easy, but because the alternative is a slow death. Modern elites know this well. Look at the tech founders, the hedge fund titans, the new digital moguls. They did not wait for permission. They did not cling to routines. They built leverage where others saw danger. Elon Musk did not hoard a paycheck. He staked everything on companies no one believed in. Jeff Bezos didn't cling to safety. He built a system that would eat entire industries. Influencers today earn more with one video than workers do in a month because they turned creativity into leverage instead of entertainment into escape. The names change, but the principle is the same. The bold inherit power, the timid inherit excuses. This is why getting rich is brutally simple. It is not about genius or luck. It is about playing a game most refuse to play. The poor play by rules that keep them safe. The rich rewrite the rules to make themselves sovereign. One side obeys, the other commands. One side hopes, the other acts. And yet, even knowing this, people resist. They say, it can't be that simple. There must be a trick, a hidden secret, a conspiracy. But the conspiracy is not hidden. It is right in front of you. The system was built to keep you predictable. Schools teach obedience, not wealth. Jobs teach repetition, not power. Media teaches distraction, not mastery. The secret is no secret at all. It is simply too brutal for most to accept. So the first principle is this. Wealth requires seeing the world as it truly is. Not as you were taught, not as you wish it to be, but as it is. And when you see it clearly, you can never go back. You realize that safety is the biggest risk, that comfort is the greatest poison, that obedience is the surest path to servitude. The moment you accept this, your choices change. You stop asking, how do I play the game better? And start asking, why am I playing their game at all? But here lies the danger. If you begin to see through the illusions, the system will resist you. Friends will tell you you're reckless. Family will tell you you've changed. Colleagues will whisper that you're arrogant. Society punishes the man who breaks the script because his courage exposes their cowardice. This is where most falter. They see the truth but retreat back into comfort because facing resistance feels unbearable. Machiavelli would laugh at this weakness. He knew that rulers are always surrounded by enemies, and wealth is no different. To chase it is to invite criticism, envy, and betrayal. But he also knew that the one who adapts to the times will prosper, while the one who clings to tradition will be destroyed. The wealthy adapt, the poor cling, and history swallows them whole. So now that we have torn away the first layer of illusion, we must go deeper. Because the real danger is not poverty. It is the illusion of stability that convinces you poverty is impossible. It is the comfort of the cage that blinds you to the chains. If you truly want to claim wealth, you must dismantle not just illusions of work and fairness, but the very psychology that holds you captive. And that is where we turn next. Because the real prison is not your job or your paycheck. It is the way you have been trained to think since childhood. If the first chains are comfort and predictability, the second are psychological. The greatest prison is not built of walls, but of beliefs. From childhood, you were trained to think small, to accept safety as virtue, to confuse obedience with success. The system drilled into you that risk is dangerous, that rules are sacred, that questioning authority leads to ruin. And once this script is written into the mind, most men never escape. They walk through life carrying invisible shackles, mistaking them for guidance. Machiavelli observed in The Prince that men are driven by two principal impulses, either by love or by fear. What he meant was simple. Humans rarely act from reason. They act from primal emotions. And when it comes to wealth, these two impulses, fear and desire, are the very levers by which rulers, elites, and the wealthy control the masses. The system makes you fear instability, fear disapproval, fear stepping out of line. Then it dangles desire. Desire for comfort, desire for status, desire for toys, to keep you moving like a horse, chasing a dangling carrot. You are pulled and pushed, and you think it is your choice, when in reality, it is a leash. Look at how modern billionaires operate. They do not simply build products, they manufacture desire and fear. Apple does not sell phones, it sells status, the fear of being left behind if you don't upgrade, the desire to be admired when you do. Politicians don't only sell policies, they sell fear of the other side and desire for security. Influencers don't only sell courses, they sell the fear of missing out and the desire to belong. These are not accidents. They are tactics straight from Machiavelli's playbook, modernized for profit. But why does it work so effectively? Because people crave stability. Even when stability is an illusion, they cling to the idea of the safe job, the reliable paycheck, the steady retirement. Yet history shows that nothing is stable. Economies collapse, industries vanish, governments fall. Stability is not security, it is sedation. It keeps you quiet while the ground beneath you erodes. Machiavelli warned that men are quick to forget danger in times of ease, but danger never forgets them. The man who clings to stability is the man most vulnerable to ruin. Let's break this down with a simple example. Picture two workers, both earning $3,000 a month. The first spends $20,500 on living expenses, then saves $500 diligently in a bank account. After a year, he has $6,000 saved, but inflation has quietly eaten a chunk of its value. He feels safe, but his safety is an illusion. He is not free. He is simply surviving. The second worker spends less, investing $1,000 each month into building a side business or learning a high-value skill. After a year, he may not have a fat savings account, but he has an asset, a skill, or venture that can scale to $10,000, $20,000, or even $50,000 a month. After a decade, the first worker is still fragile, the second is sovereign. The difference? One clung to stability, the other embraced growth. This is why activity is not the same as progress. Most people confuse motion with momentum. They wake early, work hard, hustle endlessly, but in the wrong direction. They pour energy into jobs that cap their growth, into habits that numb their ambition, into relationships that drain their focus. They tell themselves they are busy, but they are only digging the same hole deeper. Wealth requires not just action, but intelligent action. The worker's sweat may earn him wages, but the owner's vision earns him freedom. As Machiavelli said, the wise man does at once what the fool does finally. The wealthy act strategically. The poor waste decades before realizing they were running in circles. Think of money as a river. The poor stand by the bank, waiting for a few drops to splash on them. They hope for bonuses, for raises, for scraps. The rich build channels, pipes, and dams that divert the river into their own land. Same river, same flow, but one waits while the other controls. This is the brutal simplicity most cannot face. Wealth is not about effort, it is about position. Where you stand in relation to the flow decides everything, and yet society never teaches this. Schools prepare you to sit still, raise your hand and repeat facts. They reward obedience, not initiative. They do not teach you how money moves, how to persuade, how to sell, how to invest. They train you to be predictable, manageable, governable. That is not an accident. It is design. Just as Roman emperors kept the masses docile with bread and circuses, modern systems keep you docile with paychecks and distractions. You are told to work for decades for a vacation once a year, while the elites own the airlines, the hotels, and the resorts. You are entertained just enough to stay quiet, but never empowered enough to break free. Machiavelli would smirk at this arrangement. He understood that rulers create systems to protect themselves, not to elevate the ruled. The wealthy do the same today. They own the companies that shape your tastes, the platforms that shape your thoughts, the narratives that shape your choices. And as long as you obey the script, you remain predictable. Predictable to advertisers, predictable to employers, predictable to politicians, but never sovereign to yourself. This is why getting rich demands not just learning new tactics, but unlearning the old script. You must strip away the training drilled into you since childhood. The reflex to obey, the craving for comfort, the instinct to avoid risk, because until you do, every tactic will fail. A man who still believes in stability will sabotage himself even with the right strategy. He will retreat at the first sign of fear, just as Machiavelli warned that men are ungrateful, fickle, liars and deceivers, shunners of danger. To rise, you must master your own impulses before you can master wealth. So the next question becomes clear. If the psychology of fear and desire is the weapon used against you, how do you turn it into a weapon for yourself? How do you use the very levers that keep others predictable to make yourself powerful? This is where tactics begin. Not vague motivational slogans, but concrete moves that Machiavelli would whisper to a prince, or that modern elites deploy without hesitation. And once you see these tactics, you can never look at money or at people the same way again. Knowing the system is not enough. Understanding the psychology is not enough. Machiavelli himself warned that fortune favors the prepared. To see the game clearly but take no action is worse than blindness. If you want to rise, you must play with strategy. So let's break down the brutal tactics that separate the wealthy from the masses, the ones that echo Machiavelli's counsel to rulers, but now apply directly to money. The first tactic is ownership. The poor rent their lives out by the hour. The rich own things that multiply. A man can work 16 hours a day, but he will always be capped because his time is finite. Ownership removes the cap. Consider Jeff Bezos. He did not become the richest man alive by working longer hours than anyone else. He became rich because he owned Amazon. Millions of employees and billions of customers extended his reach beyond his own labor. The same with Elon Musk. He owns equity in ventures that scale far beyond his personal energy. But ownership is not reserved for titans. A freelancer who shifts from selling his time to selling a product has crossed the line. A small investor who owns a piece of real estate that earns rent while he sleeps has crossed the line. Once you own, you stop being a servant to hours and start being a master of scale. The second tactic is control of desire and fear. Machiavelli wrote, "Men are driven by two forces, fear and desire. The rich do not ignore this truth, they weaponize it. Look at luxury brands. A $5 shirt and a $500 shirt may be made from the same fabric, but the $500 shirt carries desire, status, prestige, identity. People pay for the story, not the thread." Or look at modern social media influencers. Many do not sell knowledge. They sell the fear of being left behind, the fear of irrelevance, the desire to belong. Politicians do it too, packaging fear of rivals and desire for protection. If you want wealth, you must stop appealing only to logic and start shaping emotions. Logic rarely moves people. Fear and desire move markets. The third tactic is building systems, not jobs. A job pays once. A system pays forever. When you clock in, you are trading your hours for a wage. When you build a system, a business, an online platform, a rental property, an automated sales funnel, you plant a tree that produces fruit year after year. Think of content creators. A single video, written and produced once, can bring in money for years. Compare that to the worker who must punch in every day for the same result. The rich think in terms of structures, the poor think in terms of tasks. Machiavelli would recognize this instantly. He told princes to build institutions that outlast their own rule. Systems are wealth's institutions. They make you less dependent on yourself and more dependent on machines, assets, and networks. The fourth tactic is protection and multiplication. Earning money is only the beginning. Machiavelli warned that a prince must guard against conspiracies, and wealth is no different. Money left unprotected is stolen by inflation, taxation, or manipulation. Money left idle dies slowly, but money that is protected and multiplied becomes an army. The poor treat dollars like trinkets to be spent. The middle class treats them like trophies to be saved. The rich treat them like soldiers to be deployed. A poor man spends his soldiers on entertainment. A rich man sends his soldiers into real estate, businesses, stocks, ventures, where they return with more soldiers. This is why the rich get richer. They understand that every dollar must work harder than they do. The fifth tactic is mastery of appearances. Machiavelli was ruthless on this point. Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand. People do not measure your reality, they measure your image. Wealthy individuals understand this and use perception as leverage. Influencers flaunt rented cars and borrowed watches not because they own them, but because appearances attract real wealth. Politicians project confidence even when their plans are crumbling, and that projection secures loyalty. Entrepreneurs dress their startups with the illusion of success to attract investors. Appearances open doors reality alone cannot. If you want wealth, you must learn to control perception as much as balance sheets. Now, these tactics may sound brutal, and they are, but brutality is the point. They force you to reject the illusions of comfort and confront the mechanics of power. And yet, most people hear them and retreat. They nod their heads, they take notes, but when it comes time to act, they recoil. Why? Because tactics threaten their comfort. To own requires risk. To control desire requires courage. To build systems requires endurance. To multiply wealth requires discipline. To master appearances requires audacity. These are not soft virtues, they are hard edges. But it is precisely their hardness that makes them effective. Machiavelli wrote that fortune is like a river. When it overflows, it sweeps away trees and men, but when it is channeled, it can be controlled. The tactics of wealth are channels. They turn chaos into flow. They turn unpredictability into profit. But fortune, like a river, does not wait. It floods. If you hesitate, it passes. If you prepare, you harness it. This is why tactics matter. Without them, psychology is wasted. With them, fortune becomes yours to direct. But tactics are not the end of the journey. They are only the beginning. Because once you rise, once you begin to build, you will discover something the poor never face. Enemies. Wealth attracts envy. Power attracts plots. Success attracts parasites. The higher you climb, the more hands reach out, not to applaud, but to pull you down. And if you are not prepared, you will lose everything faster than you gained it. The rise is only half the battle. The other half is survival. Machiavelli warned rulers that the throne is never secure, even when it appears so. Wealth is the same. The moment you begin to climb, the world changes around you. Friends who once cheered for you now whisper that you've become arrogant. Family members who ignored you suddenly remember your name. Strangers appear with flattery on their lips and schemes in their hands. Wealth is not just an asset, it is a magnet. And what it attracts is not always pleasant. This is why Machiavelli advised princes to rule with both cunning and ruthlessness. He knew that a leader who shows too much generosity becomes weak, and a leader who fails to guard against betrayal is destroyed. The same law governs wealth. A man who flaunts his fortune without discipline will be plundered. A man who grows rich but fails to protect himself with contracts, boundaries, and structures will be devoured by envy and manipulation. Wealth requires a fortress, not just a crown. That fortress can take many forms: legal structures, wise advisors, careful alliances, and most importantly, the ability to say no without hesitation. The newly rich often fail here. They think money will buy them respect. Instead, it paints a target on their back. They spend recklessly on toys, confusing appearance for power. They extend generosity without discernment, confusing approval for loyalty. Soon the money is gone, and they return to servitude. The truly wealthy understand that the purpose of money is not to impress, but to secure. They buy assets, not applause. They invest in control, not compliments. Machiavelli would call this the difference between ruling and being ruled. The poor buy symbols of status. The rich buy the instruments of sovereignty. But let us strip wealth down to its essence. True wealth is not a car, a mansion, or a chain around your neck. Those are trinkets, bait for the shallow. True wealth is time. It is the ability to wake when you choose, to move as you wish, to spend your days on what matters to you, not on what is demanded by others. It is freedom from the clock, freedom from the boss, freedom from the system's leash. Everything else, money, assets, investments, is simply a tool to purchase that freedom. This is why legacy matters. Machiavelli advised princes to think not only of today, but of generations to come. A ruler who governs for the moment loses everything when he dies. A ruler who builds institutions leaves behind stability. Wealth works the same way. The ultimate goal is not just to free yourself, but to build something that outlives you. Assets that feed your children, enterprises that endure, a name that commands respect long after you are gone. That is the highest form of wealth. Not toys, but permanence. Money that turns into legacy, power that outlasts your breath. So ask yourself honestly, do you truly want freedom or do you want safety? Most men will say they want freedom, but what they really crave is comfort. And comfort is the cage that keeps them enslaved. Freedom demands responsibility. It demands risk. It demands enduring envy, rejection, and fear without retreat. Safety demands nothing. And that is why most men remain poor. They are unwilling to embrace the brutal part of wealth. But you have heard the truth now. You cannot pretend ignorance. The illusions are broken. You know that systems are designed to keep you predictable. You know that wealth requires ownership, leverage, protection, and the mastery of appearances. You know that fortune rewards the bold, but only when the bold are prepared. The choice is in front of you. Obey the script or rewrite it. Spend your life in servitude or rise into sovereignty. Comfort or control, predictability or power. Imagine the alternative. Imagine waking each day knowing no one commands your time. Imagine building something that earns for you while you sleep. Imagine traveling not as a tourist on borrowed days, but as a free man on his own schedule. Imagine your children inheriting not your debts, but your strength. This is the life of the wealthy, not because they are luckier, but because they were willing to face the brutality you have been taught to avoid. Machiavelli compared fortune to a river. When it floods, it destroys the unprepared, but those who build channels and dams harness its force. Wealth is the same. The opportunities surge around you constantly. If you sit idle, they will drown you. If you prepare, they will feed you. The river does not stop flowing. The only question is whether you build channels, or whether you stand on the shore, praying for drops. So, here is the final truth. Getting rich is brutally simple. It always has been. The real question is not whether it can be done, but whether you will face what it demands. Will you cling to the illusion of safety and spend your life predictable, comfortable, and powerless? Or will you embrace the brutal reality, master fear and desire, and claim not just money, but sovereignty over your destiny?